Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to be making some soft Japanese milk bread. This is a lovely soft dough enriched with milk and a little bit of butter. And it's not a difficult loaf to make, but it does take a little bit of time. And there is a special process that you go through with this, and that's to make Yudane, which is flour and boiling water mixed together until it forms a sticky dough or gel type thing. And then once that's cooled a little bit, that gets added into the other ingredients to make the dough. And the benefit of this, by all accounts, is that the Yudane absorbs more moisture once it's been made, and it makes for a much softer dough, or softer bread basically. So the other thing to tell you is that I'm going to do this in my Pullman loaf tin, which is 13 inches long by 4 inches deep, and it has a lid. And that means that I'm going to get a square loaf basically. But I've also calculated from my recipe for the Pullman loaf tin down to a £2 loaf tin, which doesn't have a lid. And so although I'm going to concentrate on showing you how to make it for the Pullman loaf tin, I will also provide the ingredient list for the £2 loaf tin, and the process is exactly the same, except that when the dough is divided into 4 pieces for the Pullman loaf tin, for this tin you divide it into 3 pieces, and it's basically that's really the only difference. And so here I have the ingredients just for the Pullman loaf tin, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about these, but as I describe the ingredients I'm going to put a list up of these ingredients and a list of the equivalent ingredients for a £2 loaf tin, so that you can use that if that's the only tin that you've got. And both sets of ingredients will appear on my blog as well. So I have 2 separate amounts of flour, and it's bread flour. Here I have 127 grams, which is 2/3 of a cup plus 3 tablespoons, based on scooping packed flour into a 250 millilitre cup. And here I have 418 grams, 2 2/3 cups plus 2 tablespoons, again of bread flour. I have 300 millilitres, 1 1/4 cups of milk. I have 25 grams, 2 tablespoons of caster sugar, 28 grams, 2 tablespoons of softened unsalted butter, 9 grams of salt, 1 1/2 teaspoons, 6 grams of instant yeast, 2 teaspoons, and I'm also going to use 120 millilitres, half a cup of boiling water. So I hope you've been able to see the ingredients for this and for the £2 loaf tin on the screen. And the first thing to do is to make our Yudane. And I'm going to mix it by hand, but in the bowl of my stand mixer, basically. So here I'm going to put in my 127 grams of flour, and then I'm going to pour onto that 120 millilitres, half a cup of boiling water. I'm just letting that water come back to the boil in my kettle. That's good. So this is a 1/4 cup measure, 60 millilitres. So that's 60 millilitres, 120 millilitres. And I'm going to stir that around until I get a thick paste. Or gelatinous mixture basically. So that's good. And I'm just going to leave that for a couple of minutes and it will cool down just a little bit. So that is now cooled, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just break that into little chunks. And I'm going to pour my milk in to the bowl. That will stop the chunks from sticking together as I break them up. And then I'm going to put my dough hook on, and I'm just going to mix that around for about a minute or so. And it's not going to dissolve the Yudane, there will still be lumps in it, but I'll just mix it around for about a minute. So that's a minute, and what I'm going to do then is sprinkle my yeast onto the milk and then add my flour as well, the 418 grams, and I'm going to knead this on a low speed, or mix it should I say rather than knead, on a low speed until all the flour has been moistened, and that's going to take a couple of minutes. So I've kneaded that or mixed it for 2 minutes and the flour has come together, it's all moistened. So I'm actually just going to leave that to sit for 15 minutes. And then after 15 minutes I'll come back and we will add the sugar and the salt and we'll knead the dough again. It's been 15 minutes, so I'm going to turn the mixer on again and I'm going to knead this again on a low speed for about 10 minutes. So I've kneaded it for a minute, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my sugar in and my salt and then continue to knead it for a further 9 minutes. So that's been 10 minutes and I'm going to drop my butter in and I'm going to knead again for another 5 to 10 minutes until the dough has come away cleanly from the bowl. So I've kneaded that for another 8 minutes and it's come away from the bowl quite nicely. It's clinging onto the bottom, but that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip that out onto a lightly oiled or greased work surface, and that's the dough out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just knead that a little bit to shape it into a ball. Like that, and I'm going to put that into a lightly greased bowl. I'll put it in top side down and then turn it over, and I'm going to cover that and I'm going to put it into a warm place and leave it to proof until it's doubled in size, and that might take an hour. It might take an hour and a half depending on the temperature, but once it's doubled in size, I'll come back and we'll go on to the next step, which is actually to divide the dough and shape it. So I'll be back with you when this is doubled in size. So my dough has more than doubled in size, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to knock the air out of it, and I've slightly greased the counter again. I'm going to take the dough out. I'm going to divide that into 4 equal pieces. So that's 4 equal pieces of about 257 grams each. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to form each one into a ball, like that, and then I'm simply going to cover them, and I'm going to leave them to rest for 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes I'll come back and we're going to then flatten them, roll them slightly, shape them, roll them up and put them in the tin. So I've let these just rest for about 15 minutes, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shape each of them into a square, and I want the square to be about 7 inches a bit like that, and I've actually oiled my hands and my rolling pin in case I need to use that. So that's 7 inches, so I just need to go a little bit wider. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold up 1/3 like that, and then fold the other third over the top, and I'm then going to roll that out so that it's about 9 inches. And that's 9 inches. And I want that to be about 3 inches wide. Like that, and that's probably good enough. Excuse me. So I'm then going to roll that up like that, and I'm going to put that into my Pullman loaf tin. Now I've greased this. Mine doesn't need greasing, but I have greased it. So sorry, I should just squeeze the seam together first, like that. And I'll put that into the loaf tin and do the same with the other 3. Now if you're doing a 2-pound loaf tin, you divide your dough into 3 pieces and you roll those up into 3 spirals rather than the 4 that I'm doing. So I have those rolled up and they're in the tin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my lid on, but I'm going to leave a gap at the end like that, which I'm going to cover with my plastic wrap that I have saved, like that. And I'm going to leave it like that so that the dough can rise again. And once it has risen up and it's just about 1/2 inch from the top of the pan, it will be ready to bake. So at that stage I'll have preheated my oven to 190 degrees Celsius. That's 170 Celsius with a fan, 375 Fahrenheit. And I will then come back and show you what it looks like. We'll close the lid and we'll bake it. So I'll be back with you when this has risen up, as I said. So my dough has now risen and it's just below the top of the pan. So I'm going to close that. Like that. And I'm going to put that in the oven to bake it. Now I have also made another batch of dough using the recipe ingredients that I have put on the screen earlier, and that's just rising. So when that's risen slightly above the top of this pan, I will bake that as well. So I'm going to put this Pullman loaf tin into the oven and I'm going to bake it for between 30 and 35 minutes, and then it should bake and fill the pan into a square loaf base. Sorry, a square but oblong loaf. And then I'll take the lid off, turn it out and turn it back up the right way and leave it to cool completely before I come back and show you what it looks like. And that cooling is going to take probably a good 2 hours. It needs to cool so that it slices nicely. So I'll be back with you when that's cooled. I will also have baked off the other one as well. I baked the soft Japanese milk bread for 35 minutes. Then I took it out of the oven, removed the lid from the Pullman loaf tin and tested it with my internal thermometer, and the temperature had reached 93 Celsius. I was aiming for at least 90 Celsius, which would be 195 Fahrenheit. So that told me that the bread was cooked all the way through, which was fine. I tipped it out onto a wire rack and then I turned it up the right way again, and I've left it to cool for 3 hours. Now at the same time I baked one in a 2-pound loaf tin as well, and I baked that for 35 minutes as well. I tested that and that was fine as well. So this is what they look like. Now I've cut the smaller one, the 2-pound loaf tin. Now this one split just a little bit, and I think that's because I didn't prove that for quite as long as I proved this one in terms of the rise, but it's fine, it looks fine. And I've sliced it, and as you can see it's very, very soft. And so I'll have a taste of this slice. Very nice. It's moist, it's soft, it has a chew to it. The crust is nice and soft as well. Very, very good. I'm not going to cut the Pullman loaf tin one. That's going to go round to my niece, the angel Hannah, so she can cut that and have that for sandwiches. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I put a link below the video as well, and that will include the ingredient list as I put on the screen as well for both the Pullman tin and the 2-pound loaf tin, and I'll include instructions for the 2-pound loaf tin as well. So that's going to be it for today. I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future, so until then, happy baking.